My family's quiet life was disrupted when the HOA president prohibited our RV. But she had no idea my dad owned the water rights to our whole neighborhood, and he wasn't hesitant about exercising them. What would you do if you found out your arch nemesis' biggest vulnerability was something they couldn't survive, without the bright red envelope protruded from our pile of mail like a warning sign? I tore it open while I was standing in our driveway beside the RV my dad had worked on all spring fixing up. My heart fell as I read the first sentence. All recreational vehicles must be removed from Pinehurst Heights properties within 48 hours. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Our family had parked our RV in this very spot for 5 years without any complaint. Dad had just put in new cabinets and a shower last weekend for our trip to Yellowstone coming up. Mom, I yelled, racing inside with the letter. The HOA says we need to move our RV. Mom glanced up from her computer with a scowl. She picked up the letter, her eyes squinting as she read. "This is absurd," she exclaimed. "We've never had any issues before." Why now, through the window of our living room, I saw Diane Winters watering her immaculate lawn in front of the house across the street. She had just been elected HOA president 3 weeks earlier, and lo and behold, our RV was an eyesore. I saw how she kept looking over into our driveway with disgust. When Dad came home from work, his face became as red as the envelope when he read the notice. "They can't do this," he complained, pacing our kitchen. "We carefully selected this neighborhood because it accommodated RVs. It's why we paid extra for the longer driveway." Dad got out our original homeowner papers from the file cabinet. He scattered the papers out on the kitchen table, tracing his finger down every page. "There's nothing in here prohibiting RVs," he said. "They must have altered the rules." The following morning, Dad departed for work early. I saw him reading some of Grandpa's old documents from his filing box before he departed. At supper that evening, he was abnormally quiet. "You all right, Dad?" I asked. He looked up with an odd smile, just recalling something Grandpa said to me years ago that never did seem significant until now. The next day, another notice on our front door. This one with bold print. "Final warning, RV must be taken out by 5 p.m. tomorrow. We have to do something." Mom said, "Maybe we could lease storage space." Dad shook his head. "Storage would cost a lot of money, and most places don't offer power hookups to maintain the fridge operating." He drummed his fingers on the table. "Did you know your grandfather once owned all this property?" I looked up, shocked. "Really, everything in Pinehurst from the highway to the mountains?" Dad confirmed. When developers sought to construct here 20 years ago, Grandpa sold them the majority of the land, but reserved a few important sections for himself. "Like what?" Mom asked. Dad took out an old map of the property. "Like this?" He pointed to a little blue spot labeled Natural Spring at the boundary of the neighborhood. "Pinehurst Heights does not receive city water. All of the homes here have their water supplied from this spring on what is still technically our family property." My eyes grew wide, "So we own their water supply." Grandpa established a business firm named Pinehurst Water LLC prior to his death. He had passed it to me years back. I've been giving the same low prices he had set, just to pay for maintenance. A reluctant smile crossed Mom's face. "So they require our services more than we require theirs." Dad agreed. "Absolutely. And there's nothing in any agreement stating I can't set those rates." That night we saw Diane walking a group of HOA board members down our street. 4 of them marched up our driveway like they owned the place. "Mr. Miller," Diane said with a forced smile, "I hope you've made plans to relocate your recreational vehicle. It's an ugly blight on our community standards." Dad crossed his arms. "Funny, I went over all the original HOA documents. Nothing was said regarding RVs being prohibited. We have voted on new regulations in the past month," stated Tom Parker, the HOA treasurer. "It was in the newsletter." "The newsletter that you email?" Mom inquired. "The one that all the spam email goes into." Diane's smile grew strained. "Rules are rules. This community has standards to uphold. My RV is clean and well kept." "And parked on my own property," Dad said. "How is it hurting anyone?" "Property values," Diane snapped. "Would you want to purchase a house next to?" She waved her hand dismissively at our RV. That I felt my face growing hot. Our RV wasn't some piece of junk. Dad spent every weekend tinkering with it, and we'd made so many family memories in it. We're not moving it, Dad said resolutely, and I would advise you to reconsider this new policy. Then you give us no other choice than to start looking for you, Diane announced. Tomorrow starting it's $100 a day until the RV is taken away. Turning to go, Dad called after them. By the way, Diane, I've been looking over another paper lately, the water service contract for Pinterest Heights. Diane stopped but didn't go back. Did you know the water prices haven't gone up in 15 years? Dad went on. That isn't fair, don't you think? Now, she turned her eyes narrowing. What's that got to do with anything? Dad took out a folder. I own Pinterest Water, LLC. It's a private utility, not a public one, and I've determined it's time for an adjustment in the rate. He smiled, particularly for HOA board members who cause unnecessary issues for their neighbors. The color faded from Diane's face as she finally got a clue as to who she was messing with. The next morning, a bright orange sticker on our RV windshield, $100 fine for not complying. It yelled in bold black letters. Dad just laughed when he saw it, gently peeling it off without breaking the glass. They don't really know who they're up against, he said, folding the sticker and putting it in his pocket. I assisted Dad in his home office as he crouched over confusing-looking spreadsheets. What are you doing? I asked. Creating a new tiered rate structure for our water utility, he responded with a twinkle in his eye. Basic home rates will increase just a bit to pay for increasing maintenance expenses, but I'm adding a special premium level for heavy usage properties, like homes with huge lawns that require constant watering. I asked, thinking of Diane's immaculate green grass. Exactly, Dad nodded. And homes with deco fountains such as Tom Parker's or swimming pools in backyards such as the Wilsons have Dad work till midnight, printing officious-appearing letters on Pinterest Water, LLC letterhead. The next morning he delivered them personally all around the neighborhood. I was sitting at the table doing homework when our doorbell started ringing desperately that evening. When I looked out the curtains, there was Diane on the porch with her husband Kevin and 3 other HOA board members. Their faces were like thunderclouds. This is illegal, Diane yelled the minute Dad opened the door. She brandished her water bill in his face. You can't simply triple our rates in one night. Dad slouched against the door frame. I think you'll find that I can. It's all in the contract your developers signed with my father. As a private utility, I'm allowed to put in tiered pricing tiers dependent upon usage profiles and property types. Property types. Kevin stuttered. You're giving us a price hike because we serve on the HOA board. I'm increasing prices on properties with particular traits, Dad countered, such as massive ornamental water features and outsized yards. It's completely a coincidence that board members generally have such amenities. Tom Parker barreled on. This is a retaliation for the RV notice. No, not at all. Dad replied suavely. Just sound business sense. Saying of business, do we need to talk about that $100 penalty you put on my property yesterday? Because I'd be willing to tack it onto your water bill with proper administrative charges. Of course, whispers rang through the neighborhood in hours. By morning, our phone was ringing continuously with calls from worried neighbors. Dad patiently told each caller that normal households would experience only modest increases while taking them exactly how they might cut down their use and save money. Mrs. Rodriguez from up the street visited with cookies homemade. I always assumed that RV prohibition was absurd, she whispered. My grandchildren enjoy seeing your RV when they come over. They call it the Adventure Mobile. Not all people were a big supporter, to be honest. When I walked down to the bus stop the next morning, I spotted Diane and he friends, huddled together, falling silent as I approached. Their glares followed me down the street. Dad received a formal letter from the HOA demanding he attend a special meeting that evening. The community center was packed when we arrived. Every chair was filled with people standing along the walls. Diane called the meeting to order, her voice tight with anger. We've gathered to address a serious issue affecting our community. Mr. Miller is bullying the HOA, and us into not following our rules by using his grip on our water supply. Murmurs filled the room. Some nodded in agreement, but others looked skeptical. Dad stood when called upon. I'd like to clarify something. The water rate adjustments have nothing to do with your sudden enforcement of an RV ban. That wasn't. Dramatically, Kevin Winters, who happens to be opening a new RV storage facility on the outskirts of town. All eyes turned to Diane's husband, who suddenly seemed to want to vanish. That's irrelevant, Diane stuttered. Mr. Hanson, an elderly resident who never went to meetings, raised his hand. I'd like to know why we're banning RVs that harm no one while Kevin will make money on it. Sounds mighty convenient. The room broke out with questions. Individuals who had been quiet for years found their voices. Some had complaints about other recent HOA regulations, the limited holiday decorating times, the prohibition against basketball hoops, the forced mailbox styles that could only be bought from a business owned by Tom Parker's brother. This meeting is regarding water rates, not RVs, Diane yelled, slapping her gavel. Actually said Mrs. Rodriguez. It appears like it's regarding a whole lot more than that. I make a motion to vote on whether we maintain this RV ban. Seconded, called several voices simultaneously. Diane's face contorted with rage. This meeting is adjourned. As people filed out chatting excitedly among themselves, I saw Mr. Hanson handed Dad a crumpled piece of paper. Dad read it, his eyebrows flying up in astonishment. What is it? I asked as we headed to our car. As per Mr. Hanson, who was once on the board, the HOA charter has a provision for recalling. If the leaders misuse their power, residents can call for a new election. That night our RV's tires were slashed, all four of them and the spare on the back. The responding police officer shook his head as he photographed. HOA disputes are the worst, he said. Got any security cameras? Not yet, Dad answered gruffly, but I will purchase tomorrow. As we stood in our driveway surveying our vandalized RV, I noticed Diane observing us from her living room window. When our eyes crossed, she didn't glance away, rather she smiled. The community center was filled with irate voices as I elbowed my way through the crowd. All of the chairs were filled, compelling late arrivals to stand against walls. I'd never seen so many neighbors in one place before. Dad urged me toward the back where we could see everything. This emergency meeting of Pinehurst Heights HOA will come to order, Diane declared, ringing a little wooden gavel. Her immaculate blonde bob didn't budge as she glared down at all of us from the raised stage. We're here to discuss the blatant disregard of community standards by some residents. Everyone knew she was talking about us. I felt my face flush as dozens of heads turned in our direction. Dad moved forward, clearing his throat. In fact, we're here because I've exercised my right under the law to modify water rates for the community. Diane's face contorted. You can't target board members for punishment. I'm not punishing anyone, Dad answered calmly. I'm instituting a tiered pricing system, which is entirely within the law, for a private utility company. I saw as Dad withdrew, opened a folder, and proceeded to the front. This was the point he'd been waiting for when he got the first letter. He laid papers on the table for everyone to view. Those documents indicate that I own Pinehurst Water, LLC, through my grandfather's estate. The land was bought by the developer, but not the rights to the water. It's all laid out in the county records. Diane took the papers. Ridiculous. You can't triple our prices without notice. In fact, Dad stated, gesturing to Section 12 of the contract, I have to give 24 hours notice that I have done through certified mail yesterday. Mrs. Patel, who lived 3 houses away from us, stood up. I don't know why we're arguing over an RV in the first place. The Wilsons have maintained it clean and in good condition for years. A few people agreed with nods. Mr. Robinson, who had spent more time in Pinehurst than anyone else, waved his unsteady hand. My grandson enjoys seeing that RV when he comes over. He calls it the Adventure House. What is it hurting? Whispers traveled throughout the room. I saw school friends with parents looking bewildered at why grown-ups were arguing over something so insignificant. The property values? Diane maintained, her voice rising. Studies show that visible recreational vehicles decrease home values by up to 15%. That's not true, called a voice from the crowd. It was Mr. Peterson, a real estate agent who lived on Maple Lane. I've sold 12 homes in this neighborhood in the past 3 years. The RV has never been mentioned as a concern by any buyer. More murmuring filled the room. People began talking about other changes since Diane became president. 6 months ago, the ban on basketball hoops, restrictions on holiday decorations, the new rules about grass height and mailbox styles. My children can't even play outside anymore without getting a violation notice, complained Mrs. Jackson, a single mother of twins. Diane's face flushed red. These standards protect our investments. This meeting isn't about those problems. It's regarding the Wilsons' refusal to conform and now trying to blackmail the board. Dad shook his head. No blackmail. I'm just operating my company. If the HOA withdraws its arbitrary RV prohibition, I may rethink the new rate policy. Kevin Thompson, Diane's husband, jumped up from his seat. This is extortion. We ought to sue. You're welcome to try it, Dad said. But first, I advise you to read your home's purchase agreement more diligently. Page 8 clearly states water services being supplied by a private firm, not associated with the HOA. I saw individuals whip out their cell phones texting neighbors who were not around. This was greater than our RV. Now this meeting is adjourned, Diane yelled, pounding her gavel over and over. Nobody budged. Instead, Mr. Robinson stood up once again. I call for an immediate vote to rescind the RV ban, he uttered firmly. Seconded, called several voices. Diane looked frantic. That's not on the agenda. We require notice for votes. Section 5 of the HOA bylaws permits emergency votes if enough members are present, said Mrs. Patel, who I now recalled was an attorney. The room erupted in pandemonium. Diane and the other board members huddled in a group, whispering frantically. At last, she announced they had to see their lawyer and adjourned the meeting. As the people exited, many remained to shake hands with Dad or give him a pat on the back. It's about time someone stood up to them, said Mr. Robinson. That evening, as we had dinner, Dad appeared concerned. They won't let go easily, he cautioned us. People like Diane don't like to lose control. Mom squeezed his hand. We have not done anything wrong. The RV is on our land, and you have every right to establish water rates. At 2:17 a.m., our security came alarm woke us. Dad and I hurried over to the window and watched in horror as Kevin Thompson, dressed all in black, wandered around our RV with something in his hand. The hissing sound informed us precisely what he was doing. Before we even noticed the slashed tires on the security footage, Dad called the police right away. But by the time they got there, Kevin was gone. We showed them the clear video evidence. We can file charges for vandalism, the officer said, writing in his notebook. This is criminal damage to property. I couldn't believe someone would go this far over an RV. As morning dawned, I was wondering how much worse things were going to get before they got better. The neighborhood I'd grown up loving now seemed split and unsafe. Dad put his hand on my shoulder as we looked out at the damage. Sometimes standing up for what's right, has a price, he said softly. The question is if we're willing to pay it. I nodded as the officer made a call to his station. We had no idea that Kevin's nighttime vandalism would be the start of a war between our neighborhood and another that would test who our real friends were. Yellow caution tape waved around our RV. The next morning, neighbors eased their vehicles to look as they passed by our house. Some horned in solidarity, others glared or hastily averted their gaze. Dad did not go to work meeting with the insurance adjuster regarding the tire damage, for tires slashed almost $1,200 worth of repairs. The police did take our security footage, but said pressing charges would only raise tensions more. Maybe that's just what we need, Dad said, taking a sip of his coffee. Some consequences of what they had done. I checked my phone before school and saw dozens of messages on our neighborhood group chat. Overnight, Pinterest Heights had divided into two factions. Team Thompson and Team Wilson battle lines were drawn over who believed that our RV needed to remain and who thought that Diane was saving property values. Jessica, my best friend since third grade, texted me separately. My My mom says I'm not allowed to your house anymore. She doesn't want to get on Diane's bad side. Sorry. My heart plummeted. This stupid feud was ruining everything. At school, I could feel eyes on me in the hallway. The Thompson twins. Diane and Kevin's daughters circulated rumors my family was attempting to bankrupt the HOA. I held my head high, recalling Dad's advice about standing up for what is right. When I returned home, I saw Mrs. Patel standing at our door with a tray of freshly homemade samosas. A small gesture of support, she said with a warm smile. Many of us are thankful someone finally put the board in its place. She wasn't alone. All afternoon, a steady stream of neighbors came over, some with food, others with only words of encouragement. Mr. Robinson stopped by with a petition he'd initiated to have the present board members removed. We need 60% of signatures, he said to Dad, showing him the list of increasing names. People are fed up with being bullied in their own neighborhood. Our mailbox brought another message. The water bills had been mailed. Out across the street, his face redder than his withering roses. You're limiting our water pressure, he bellowed, pointing a damning finger at Dad, who was pruning our hedges. My sprinkler system is hardly functional. Dad laid down his clippers calmly. That's not true, Kevin. Everyone gets the same water pressure. Then why are my plants dying? Kevin demanded. Maybe you're saving usage because of the new rates Dad proposed. A lot of homes are being more careful about their usage now. Kevin's jaw clenched. This isn't finished. Wilson. Not by a long way. As he turned to go, something dropped from his back pocket, a crumpled paper that fluttered to our driveway. I got it back after he left, my stomach knotting up as I read its contents. Dad, I called, my voice quivering. You need to read this. It was a printout from Thompson's towing service. No relation to Kevin, to my surprise, with our address. And a pickup time for the next Monday, when both my parents would be working and I'd be at school. They're going to tow our RV when we're away. Mom said, reading over my shoulder, Can they do that? Dad called our lawyer straight away. Not legally. He told me after he'd hung up. It would be theft of private property, but we have to ensure somebody's here to stop it. That evening, we worked out a plan. Dad took Monday off work and asked Mr. Robinson and Mrs. Patel to act as witnesses. I whined to stay home as well, but my parents made me. I couldn't miss school over neighborhood gossip. I couldn't concentrate in class, constantly looking at my phone for news. At lunch, Ashley Thompson ambushed me in the cafeteria. Your family is ruining everything, she spit at me. My mom had to cancel her spa membership due to your ridiculous water bill. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Maybe your parents ought to consider before they go and vandalize someone else's property, I answered, striding away with whispers trailing behind me. After the last bell had rung, I pedaled home on my bike faster than ever before. I was just in time to catch a tow truck pulling away with nothing in it, and Kevin and Diane standing on their front lawns, seething. Dad, Mr. Robinson, and Mrs. Patel were in our driveway next to the RV, speaking with Officer Martinez once more. What happened? I asked in a huff. They called a tow truck without HOA board permission, Dad explained. When the driver read our property deed and heard about the harassment, he refused to touch our RV. Diane yelled across the street, You're ruining this neighborhood's values. No one will want to buy here with that abomination to see. Her words reached where some neighbors stood, watching the spectacle develop. Mrs. Jackson moved forward unexpectedly. In fact, Diane, I'm putting my house on the market due to you. Your incessant nitpicking and fines made life here unbearable for me and the children. Murmurings of approval ran through the small assembly. That night, a notice went into everyone's mailbox. An emergency valuation of $500 per household to cover legal expenses to defend neighborhood standards. The notice asserted the board had voted on this in a private emergency meeting. They can't do that without adequate notice and voting, Mrs. Patel said when neighbors assembled in our living room later. It's a flagrant disregard of the bylaws. As darkness fell, headlights lit up our driveway as additional cars arrived. Almost 30 neighbors packed our house, furious about the evaluation and prepared to strike. Mr. Robinson stood in our living room, resting on his cane. "We've had enough," he declared. "I'm calling for a formal recall election of the entire board." Diane and Kevin, who had been observing from their window, walked across the street when they noticed the crowd. They pushed through our front door without warning. "What is this?" Diane asked. "An illegal gathering, neighbors chatting on private land," Dad replied. "Absolutely legal," Kevin smiled with a superior air. "You'll never get enough signatures on a recall. You must have a supermajority." Mr. Robinson displayed a considerable sheaf of papers. "We've already got 78% of homeowners on board," he said softly, "including every household on Sycamore Lane and Pine Court." The assurance left Diane's face as she realized her reign was at an end. The bullies she'd terrorized for months had finally gained their voice united against her. "This isn't over," she threatened, backing away from the door. But scanning the set faces in our living room, I knew it was. The issue now wasn't if things would be different, but how fast and if our neighborhood could recover from the wounds already done. My heart was pounding against my ribs as I saw the huge tow truck turn into our road. They were actually going to pull it off, steal our RV while we'd be at work. Good thing I had called in sick today. I hurried for my phone, almost knocking over my water glass in the process. The driver stopped right at our house. His diesel engine grumbling through my bedroom window, I could see Diane and Kevin watching from across the street, not even trying to hide their smug say. His eyes grew tighter as he looked in the direction of Diane and Kevin, who were speed walking down the street in our direction. "They said they're the HOA and have complete authority," he indicated, his finger pointing in their direction. Diane's face was scrunched up. "This RV breaks our neighborhood regulations. We have every right to have it taken away." "Actually, you don't," I countered, pulling out the emergency business card Dad had left me for me to use. "Call our attorney now. She'll tell you exactly how many laws you're violating, or you can split and keep from getting sued for trespassing and attempted theft." The driver glanced at the card, then at Diane and Kevin, then back at me. I could see the gears whirling in his head. This work wasn't worth a legal hassle. "Look, I don't want any trouble," he said, backing away toward his truck. Kevin's face grew red as a tomato. "We're paying you to get the job done. Not enough to get sued." The driver growled, climbing back into his truck. As he drove off, Diane poked her finger at me. "You think you're so smart, but this isn't finished. Your neighbors are ruining property values in Pinehurst Heights. Nobody wants to see that eyesore." My hands trembled, but I held my ground. "Perhaps you should consult with the neighbors on how they feel, rather than decide for everyone." She laughed. A biting, cruel sound. "I know precisely what my neighbors want. That's why I'm president." Within hours, every one mailbox in our town had a bright orange envelope. Emergency assessment notice of $500 owed by each house for legal costs to defend neighborhood standards and property values. Dad was angry when he came home. "This is getting out of hand," he said, dumping the notice on our kitchen table. "She's punishing everybody because of us." Mom was concerned. "Maybe we should just park the RV somewhere else. It's not worth getting the entire neighborhood against us." "That's what she wants," Dad answered. "Give in once, and she'll just find something else to prohibit next." My phone rang with a message from Mr. Robinson emergency meeting at my house tonight. "Bring your parents?" We snuck out after supper, walking through the falling darkness to Mr. Robinson's house 3 doors down. I was amazed to notice at least 20 neighbors sitting in his living room. The Jacksons, the Smiths, the Kumar, the Gonzaleses, even grumpy Mr. Peterson who complained about everything. "Thank you all for coming," Mr. Robinson said, his voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "I've been living in Pinehurst Heights for 32 years, and I've never seen an HOA board abuse their authority like this." Heads nodded in unison around the room. Mr. Jackson stood up. "The RV ban was only the beginning. Diane charged me $250 because my grass was half an inch too high when I was away at my mother's funeral." Mrs. Kumar raised her hand. "She issued me a violation notice for hanging Indian decorations during Diwali." One by one, neighbors told tales of Diane's little rules and stiff fines. Dad listened intently, then described how she was now attempting to have our RV towed and penalizing the entire neighborhood with extra fees. Mr. Robinson cleared his throat. "I've examined our HOA bylaws. We have the right to recall the board through signatures from 2/3 of homeowners. Diane will never allow that to happen. Mrs. Smith said she can't help. But we have the signatures. Mr. Robinson answered, producing a wad of paper. I've already written the petition. By 9:30 that evening, we had 47 signatures over half the neighborhood. As we walked home, lights were on in houses throughout Pinterest Heights. Neighbors chatting to neighbors for the first time in months. The following evening, I saw Diane and Kevin sitting at their window, watching as a continuous stream of individuals went to the home of Mr. Robinson to sign the petition. When they became aware of what was going on, Diane sent panic messages to her remaining few supporters, pleading with them to hold their ground. At 8 p.m., precisely, our doorbell rang. Mr. Robinson stood at the door with a thick dossier of documents flanked by no less than 30 neighbors. "We're off to Diane's residence," he declared. "Thought you might like to join us." We walked together in a crowd, taking up the whole street. Porch lights came on as we went by more neighbors to join our procession. By the time we arrived at Diane's well-manicured lawn, nearly the whole neighborhood was gathered there. Mr. Robinson rang the bell. When Diane opened the door, her firm smile disappeared at the sight of the multitude. "What does it mean?" she demanded. "We're petitioning for a recall vote of the whole board." Mr. Robinson declared, his voice firm. Diane's laughter had sounded artificial. "You can't do that. You require a supermajority." "We have signatures of 78% of homeowners," he said, holding up the thick pile of papers. Her face went white as she had the dawn of understanding that her days as ruler were over. Kevin stepped behind her, mouth agape in shock. "This is all due to an RV," she spluttered. "I was simply trying to maintain our neighborhood." "Ridiculous vote. I want people to realize what's really going on," she said. Her tone pointed. "One family wouldn't obey basic rules that keep our property values up. Then they used their hold on our water supply to bully the whole neighborhood." Dad stood up. "That's not accurate. The water rate hike affected everyone the same, with discounts for seniors and families with kids. Only board members who voted to ban the RV received the top rate." "Just my point." Diane spoke up. "He used necessary utilities as blackmail against elected officials doing their jobs." Mr. Peterson, who only spoke a few words at meetings, raised his hand. "I've been here 40 years. That RV isn't hurting anyone. What's hurting us are these constant fees and fines for things nobody cared about until you took over." Applause spread throughout the room. Diane's cheeks flushed a deep red. The board asked to dismiss this recall attempt as invalid. She announced, banging her gavel. Mrs. Gonzalez, who was a paralegal, stood up. "That's not how this works. The bylaws explicitly state that once signatures are verified, the vote must go on." "Fine," Diane snapped. "Let's get this over with." The vote was taken by secret ballot as papers were gathered and tallied. Tension filled the room. Diane kept glancing at her phone, barely concealing her nerves. Kevin whispered to their supporters, who looked more and more uncomfortable. After 20 minutes, Mr. Robinson came back to the microphone. By a vote of 67-4 with 3 abstentions, the motion to recall the existing HOA board passes. The room exploded into cheers and applause. Diane's face contorted before she quickly recovered, piling her belongings into her shaking hands. "You'll regret this," she grumbled as she elbowed past my family towards the door. "Good luck keeping property values up with RVs and who knows what else filling up the neighborhood." As she departed, the atmosphere in the room immediately improved. People were smiling, greeting each other as neighbors they'd never really met. Mrs. Smith brought out surprise cookies she'd made for the occasion. "We need to elect a new board," someone shouted. Mr. Robinson was nominated for president by unanimous consent. The new board was soon populated with a combination of old residents and younger families, such as Mrs. Kumar as treasurer and Mr. Jackson as secretary, their first official act repealing the RV ban and most of Diane's restrictive regulations. The crowd applauded again when they also voted to refund all dubious fines issued over the last year. 2 days later, a for sale sign popped up in front of the Thompsons' residence. Dad upheld their triple water rate, observing that the deal was to run until either the RV prohibition was eliminated permanently from HOA bylaws or the parcel of land changed hands. "They can't move quickly enough," Mom observed, observing Kevin overseeing movers from our living room window. I never knew just how much tension they were generating until now. On the next few weeks, Pinehurst Heights changed, basketball hoops resurfaced in driveways. Mrs. Kumar hung lovely lanterns for a soon-to-arrive holiday. Mr. Peterson at last repaired his ancient mailbox rather than purchasing the pricey approved one. Our RV remained proudly parked in our driveway. Dad even painted it lovely new colors and put down decorative stone pavers around it to make it even prettier. The new board's largest undertaking was repurposing an unused grassy space into a compact neighborhood RV and boat parking area, providing individuals with choices if they did not want to have larger vehicles in their homes. 6 weeks following the recall, we had a neighborhood cookout along the side of our RV. Kids played tag between several yards. Adults who hardly knew one another, despite living next to each other for years, conversed like old buddies. Mr. Robinson clinked his glass for attention. "I'd like to raise a toast," he said, scanning the room at all of us, "to standing up for what is right. Even when it's difficult, people raise their glasses in agreement." Dad grinned, and to remembering that communities do best when we keep our eyes on the people, not on the little rules. As the sun went down over Pinehurst Heights, I saw families laughing together. The Thompsons' home still stood vacant, a silent reminder of how suddenly things can turn around when a community gives voice to itself. That evening, as I assisted Dad clean up, I raised the question that had been on my mind. Do you believe we did the right thing? Sometimes I regret the way it all ended. Dad stopped reflecting deeply. Standing up to bullies is never wrong. But I learned something too. Now and then, when you hold power like controlling the water rights, you have to be mindful how you exercise it. The following morning, a moving van drove up in front of the Thompsons' home. Our new neighbors were a nice couple with 2 children and a camping trailer. We heard that this area is very community-minded. The woman said to Mom, "That's precisely what we were searching for." Mom chuckled. "You wouldn't believe the amount of work that went into making that real." As I assisted in bringing cookies over to greet them, I saw our RV shining in the driveway. Not only a van anymore, but a reminder of something greater. A reminder that sometimes you must fight for the right to be yourself. When their daughter inquired about I'd install her new basketball hoop afterward, I couldn't help but smile. "Absolutely," I said. "That's what neighbors